Alright, I think we're good. Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is actually being shot on the new iPhone 14 Pro Max in cinematic mode, in the new 4K resolution. Because if you remember on the 13, if we go back, which I'm now shooting on, you can see it's a little bit fuzzier because it's limited to 1080p, and also you only get the 30 FPS option, which is not particularly cinematic. So let's go back to the 14 and back to the 14 Pro Max. So you can see it's a little bit sharper, we have a wider field of view, it does look nicer, and of course also we have both 30 and 24 FPS options. So the improved cinematic mode is just one of the upgrades, but as someone who has been using this, the 13 Pro Max, as their main, I hate to say, daily driver for the best part of the last year, except when I've been testing other phones, naturally I'm curious how much better this 14 Pro Max is. So while I will be doing a sort of fuller, more in-depth, long-time review in a few weeks, I do have a few thoughts I want to share about the 14 Pro Max so far. And if you do enjoy the video, then a cheeky like and subscribe would be lovely. And I can tell you straight away that if you are buying one of these, it's going to sting a little bit more than usual, as here in the UK, the Pro Max is £100 more expensive than last year, now starting at $11.99 and going all the way up to $17.49 if you really want to show off with the new 1TB model. And to make things worse, the US haven't had a price increase, and that £1,750 iPhone 14 Pro Max 1TB, which I actually have here, is only $1,600 in the US, although that is before sales tax. So outside the US, we've had a bit of a price hike, and it may make you reconsider whether you want or can even afford one of these, especially with the cost of living right now. Now, by this point, you've probably already watched a dozen videos on the new iPhone, so you know what's up. But to summarize quickly, we get this very nifty new dynamic island pill-shaped notch. The bezels are a tiny bit thinner. There's also two new colors. We have midnight black and deep purple, although I have the silver one here. We get the new A16 chip, which is a little bit faster and also unlocks a couple of new features. The screen gets quite a bit brighter for HDR video and if you're outdoors. There's bigger and faster camera sensors, including a new 48 megapixel main lens with a new 2x optical zoom option. Also, Apple's Deep Fusion camera processing tech magic wizardry thing is now called the Photonic Engine. Video gets the improved 4K cinematic mode as well as a new super stable action mode. The selfie camera has a wider aperture and now supports autofocus. Apple says the battery should last about an hour longer than last year. And there's also a couple of new safety features, crash detection and satellite SOS, although the latter of which is only available in the US and Canada for now. And of course, it ships running iOS 16, with the new iPhone 14 Pro series exclusively getting this new always-on display, which takes advantage of the new 1 Hz refresh rate, so it shouldn't drain your battery too much. Now, side by side with last year's 13 Pro Max, the 14's slimmer bezels and smaller notch I think do add up to make the screen feel a bit more spacious and less cramped, if you will. It's not a night and day difference, but more obvious than I had expected. But what really jumps out is this new dynamic island. And while people love to call anything new a gimmick, and certainly it's not a reason to upgrade to the 14 Pros by itself, I think it's neat. Although, despite the new pill-shaped cutout being 30% smaller than the previous notch, in reality it doesn't make much difference, as that extra slice of screen that you get above it isn't particularly useful. And actually, this new cutout does sit slightly further down on the screen. But aesthetically, I think it looks a lot more modern, and also it is one of the few ways that you can actually differentiate that you have the new one versus the old one, which is important to some people. And it does add some quite unique functionality. It's kind of like an always-on-top notification bar widget thing, with some very nice animations. Downsides? Well, firstly, it seems odd that a single tap opens the app, but then a long press expands the widget. I feel like it should be the other way around. And also, there's a bit of a reachability issue on the Pro Max's bigger screen. Any interaction, including accepting a call, is now a two-handed job. One of my concerns, though, is that my mucky fingerprints as I'm interacting with the dynamic island are going to smudge the front camera lens. And when I was taking a picture last night at the bar, I did notice there was some flaring going on. I then sort of cleaned it with my t-shirt and it went away. So I am experiencing a little bit of that, and kind of just instinctively now I'm regularly cleaning the lens with my shirt. Elsewhere, it's all very much the same as last year. We're still rocking that lightning port, no improvement to charging speeds either. The only other noticeable change is this new always on display, or AOD, which quite nicely transitions into the lock screen, so it does feel more intuitive and streamlined compared to every other phone that just goes black and then pops up with a clock or an image. Although at the moment there's not a lot of customization, but future iOS updates are due to add more. So I went out to dinner last night, and while I know it's never good form to put your phone on the table, you know, people do sometimes if you're in the office and it's on your desk, but one thing I have started to notice is that the always on display is too bright, too obvious. It's taking me a minute to realize the screen is off, well, in AOD mode. So I keep then pressing the power button to fully turn it off, but then it turns it on. Now you can disable the AOD if you prefer, which I might actually do, because right now I find myself just flipping the phone over. Now at the opposite end of that dimmed lock screen, we have this new higher brightness. In fact, this is the brightest phone you can buy. HDR video is bumped up to 1600 nits and outdoor brightness is now a whopping 2000. Although undoubtedly keeping the screen this bright will drain your battery faster. Now the very first thing you should do when you get your new iPhone is put a case on it. Why? Because, well, this is why. I learned the hard way, so I've teamed up with CASETiFY, who also sent over this lovely box of goodies, from tempered glass screen protectors to lens covers, and of course, a few cases. Now I have the iPhone 14 Pro Max, so I'm going to use this, which is one of CASETiFY's new Ultra Impact cases. There's also new Impact and Bounce cases as well, and with a new twister design that includes their EcoShock technology, we get 20% more protection. In fact, the Ultra Impact case I have here gives me up to 11.5 feet of drop protection. We have the 5X mil standard, it's MagSafe compatible of course, and actually it's made with 65% recycled and plant-based material. Can't believe I'm doing this, these just arrived this morning. Here we go. Oh. It's a little bit scuffed on the bumpers, but that's kind of the whole point. It did its job, and not a crack on the case, or importantly, the screen. That'll do. Definitely check out CASETiFY's new iPhone 14 collection, and I'll leave a link in the description below. Okay, let's talk about this camera. So we have the usual 3 lenses with the main lens, which we've got now. We can pull out to the ultra wide, which is also improved. In fact, the new photonic engine should give us improved low light on all the lenses versus last year. But as you can see, if we go up to 2 times, that's new. So it's cropping in, or at least using the central 12 megapixels of the new 48 megapixel main lens. You can also punch into the usual 3 times if you want, and then you can pinch in all the way up to 15 times, which I have noticed is a little bit sharper actually than last year, but still not ideal compared to the competition. Bring it back, too much, too much, too much. I think we'd have all liked a bit of a longer zoom as well. Now switching to portrait mode, and if you want to jump to 2 times again, what we now have is foreground blur, which to be honest I thought we already had, but essentially if I put my hand out here, it's still focusing on my face, but you have this nice foreground blur. Of course, this ultra-wide camera, if we punch back out, also doubles as a macro, so I can then use my little guy again and come right up to the camera. It is one of the best, if not the best, macro cameras you can get with a 15cm focal length, so that's pretty handy as well. But mostly it's about the new sensors, the wider apertures, and also the new photonic engine, which is doing its magic behind the scenes. So let's look at some photos side by side and see if it is much of an upgrade over last year. And before I tell you which is which, can you see much of a difference? And also, do you prefer one over the other? Well, somewhat predictably, I put the new 14 Pro Max's photo on the right. Did you guess correctly? Let me know in the comments. So there are definitely a few trends that I'm seeing. If you look at Sarah's face here, you can see on the right with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it's more detailed, it's sharper, the colors aren't as warm, and altogether it's just more realistic. Across the board, I'm noticing an improvement in white balance. You can see here the Castle is a more natural gray, whereas on the 13 it's got a bluey tint to it. Now in good light, going between the 3 main lenses, there isn't an awful lot in it. Although zoomed in with a 3x telephoto, the 14 is a lot sharper, dare I say, over-sharpened, which is a trend I'm seeing as well. I mean, look at this. At first glance, not a whole lot in it, but then if you look at the wood and the fine detail on the flowers, the 14 does come across as more detailed, but it looks like they've just turned the sharpness up to 11. I love this photo, and there isn't really that much between them, although you can see that blurry bokeh effect is more prominent both in the foreground and the background of his ears and the top of his hair, which I think looks more natural. So my takeaway with the main cameras is that we are seeing a noticeable improvement, particularly in low light, particularly in terms of white balance, color accuracy, and detail. I do think shots are over sharpened. I hope Apple could maybe turn that down a little bit, and I'm definitely getting Samsung vibes from the aesthetic now as opposed to the flatter, warmer, less realistic look that we've had with iPhones for quite a few years now. Switching to the selfie, I actually kind of prefer the warmer look of the 13 Pro Max here, but also you can see the 14 is once again more detailed and sharper, possibly too sharp. Honestly, if I changed the 14 Pro Max text to Galaxy S22 Ultra, I think you'd probably believe me. It is quite a different look that they're going for now with the 14 series. Okay, let's talk about video, and while there were rumors that we might get 8K, that never really materialized. In fact, we haven't had any change in resolution options here except for that new 4K cinematic mode. Now in good light, there isn't really much between them, although switching between lenses, I'm not sure if you can see that as well, it does look noticeably smoother on the 14 series. It was already very good on the 13, but actually I do find the transition while filming is now smoother, but sadly you still can't pause and resume video, and also you can't switch between the front and rear cameras or vice versa while filming. You can see here again, like the photos, the 13 struggling with that white balance and the color of the castle. The blue of the sky is overwhelming everything else. The colors on the 14 are much more natural and true to life. Okay, let's do a little side-by-side video, both shooting at 4K 30. This is my studio, nice and clean and tidy as you can tell, but hopefully if I just sort of walk around a little bit, you'll get an idea if the video quality is any different, the stabilization, the color, which I'm noticing seems to be quite a big difference this year with the 14 series. So let's have a little close-up on my camera. I shoot usually with the A7S III. This is my big TV, my 75-inch LG. I've got this very cool table. You may have spotted this in a few videos. It's called a CASETiFY table. Basically, it's RGB on the outside, and it draws patterns with a little metal ball that goes around inside. This is my usual desk setup. Again, nice and tidy. I actually have been shooting mostly over here today. In fact, this is the edit for the very video you're watching, which has some work to be done. But so far, what do you think of the video? Are you seeing much difference? Side by side on the screen doesn't seem to be all that different. What do you think? Honestly, I'm struggling a little bit to see the difference. I would say there's maybe a touch less noise on the 14, it's a tiny bit more detail perhaps, but it's all very minor and kind of hard to see, even side by side, I'm sure you'll agree. And actually, if I jump to the 3x lens on both, while the 13 is noisier, it's more detailed. It seems to be worse on the 14, although we do get less noise, which is a bit odd. And finally, we have action mode, which you enable by tapping the little running icon man at the top of the camera app, and that basically drops the resolution down to 2.8K and gives you much more stable video, which is ideal if you're doing some POV shots or you're running after your kids. It's nothing really new for Android phones, but for iPhones, well, it gives you another option. Now, what about the A16 chip in here, which only the Pro and the Pro Max get? Is it really that much faster? Well, Apple says the A16 is 10% faster and 20% more efficient than the A15, and that does roughly tally with my results in Geekbench and 3D Mark. We're getting slightly higher scores, and also specifically here in 3D Mark, you can see the 14 used less battery during the same test. So a slight improvement, but then these tests don't really give you the full picture. We've got a new neural engine for AI and camera processing, a new display engine which unlocks the screen's higher brightness, and also the new 1 to 120Hz ProMotion, which means that lock screen can be really efficient. In real terms, this is the most powerful phone you can buy, and also generally games are better optimized on the Apple App Store versus the Google Play Store for a more fragmented Android ecosystem. But what about battery life? Well, interestingly, the new 14 Pro Max actually has an ever so slightly smaller battery compared to last year's 13 Pro Max, but really it's going to come down to the A16's better efficiency, how much that always-on display drains your battery, also if you're running around outside with that max 2000 nit brightness a whole bunch, how you use it will have the biggest impact. So far, it seems to be just shy of what I was getting on my 13 Pro Max. We may see some improvement over time as the AI recognizes your patterns of usage and we get more software updates, but still, the 14 Pro Max is one of the best phones you can get for battery life. Although I must say I had hoped we'd see a boost in charging times, as it still takes a good half hour to reach 50%. Samsung and Apple really need to catch up. On paper, there are a lot of upgrades, there's a lot to talk about, but in reality, It all feels very familiar, especially if you've used an iPhone for the last 2 or 3 years. Let me know what you make of the 14 Pro Max, and also this cinematic mode, which I've been filming all this talking head A-roll in throughout the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.